Good morning. It's good to be with you guys. I want to welcome you to the 11 o'clock / 10 o'clock service for Grace Church just for this week. Also, anyone online, just want to say welcome. We live stream this as well. My name is David Black. I'm the campus pastor here. And this thing that we're doing right now at this time, we like to say we open God's heart. That's this. And we like to see what he has to say about our heart. And if you're a follower of Jesus, here's what we're hoping would happen. Our prayer would be that you would connect with God this morning, that you'd actually hear from him in some form or fashion. If you're not a follower of Jesus, you don't have to be a follower of Jesus to come here. We're honored that you would investigate him and kind of check him out and involve us in on that. So here's kind of our hope for you. If that's you, it's kind of our prayer that you'd leave maybe having some answers to some questions, maybe having a community of people with which to explore those questions with, so you don't go it alone, okay? That's kind of where we're aiming. If you are new with us, you picked a great Sunday to come. We are starting a new series today that's going to take us all the way up till Easter. And so if you were here last week, we wrapped up a series called God Is, and that was phenomenal. That whole series was just a tremendous growing point for us as a church. I don't mean like numerically, I mean like spiritually. And so we talked about everything about God's love that ever is like everlasting, all the way up to like how does God put an end to sin, not only in my life, but in what is in my family too. So I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at that. We're kind of leaving that behind. That was pretty heavy and weighty. And as we come up to Easter, we're going to start looking at something that's a little bit lighter, okay? So this is not by any means just fluff, but it is something that I think is important to look at as we approach Easter, because as we get closer to Easter, here's what happens. Our society still, because we're in the South, begins to focus a little bit on this day and go, okay, what happened? And sometimes we actually are exposed to practices in the church that we wouldn't normally be exposed to perhaps at any other type of year except for maybe Christmas and Easter. So we're going to take a look at these things that the church does and does around this time of year and just kind of ask some questions about them, okay? So here's what we're defining spiritual acts as. So if you're like, what is a spiritual act? If you know nothing else from this whole series, here's what we want you to walk away with. That a spiritual act is an activity of God's people. That would be the church, okay? People are a church, not the building. God doesn't live here. We don't keep him in the back and bring him out on Sunday. It's people gathered together that embodies, means we're doing it physically, the reality of God's work. Okay, so spiritual act is an activity of God's people that embodies the reality of God's work. Now, if that's a little too like up there for you, like, and that sounds like a textbook, right? Here's what I would say to you. It's where the we experiences the why. Okay, so these are practices, these are acts that take place in all churches, for all times, for all people, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of tradition, regardless of denomination, regardless of continent, okay? So if you're one of those people who are like, man, I just wish the church could get on the same page, what we're talking about are practices that span not only this church, but other churches for all time, in all different places. It's important to remember the why. Here's why. Because rituals, right? A ritual is just something that's been done where the reason has been forgotten. And what we don't want is just empty rituals week after week after week after week. We actually want to connect with the reason to why we would do something. Because there are reasons behind it. Maybe for you, if you grew up in church, you never really thought about this. You're like, I don't know, my mom did that, my dad did that, now I do that. Maybe you're the type of person who's like, well, it's not broken, so why fix it, right? I don't know why I did that in a little country accent. I'm sorry there. But like maybe you're the person who's like, we've just always done it this way. Or maybe you're the type of person, for some of us, we didn't grow up in church, and so when we come into a room like this, where the seats are all aimed at a podium, and we're going to like do some things together, you're like, I don't know, I'm a little nervous. Like, what ride have I signed up for, right? There are no seatbelts on your seat. Maybe we should add them. I'm not sure. But, right, we're doing these things together, and you're going, it's a little odd and no one's really ever explained it to me. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to spend some time actually, hopefully, if you've forgotten, hoping you remember. Hopefully, if you've never ever asked or you've been afraid to ask, maybe fill in some of that for you because it makes a big difference. Okay? So here's where we're starting today. Okay? This is it. Drum roll. We sing. We sing. You say, we sing? Yeah. Singing, believe it or not, has been a practice of the church for all times, in all places, all peoples, everywhere. Now, think about that for a second. That may not seem odd to you, because maybe it's the South, right? And you get that. But think about this. Where do we as adults sing corporately together, aside from church? Like where? Not a concert, not where someone's performing for you, not where you go and someone else has a microphone, where you're like, hey, I'm going to get with some friends, we're going to light a fire, and we're going to sing. You'd be like, what is happening there? Are there robes? I'm not real sure. Do I need to go? Like, where do we do this? So I was thinking about this. I don't know if this is you, just this is how my brain works and is messed up. I was thinking, like, where do we sing? Soccer fans. I immediately thought of soccer fans. If you've ever been to Atlanta United, man, they are singing on like the public transport all the way down. Everyone's singing. I feel bad for everyone not going to the game because the whole car is alive. And when you get there, you stand for the entire game and you sing songs about how we're winning or how we're going to win or how the other team just stinks. That's how it works, right? Secondly, I don't know why I thought this way. Maybe this is just me, but when I thought about adults singing, for some reason, I thought about pirates. Not sure. I don't know. They have a lot of similarities to soccer fans, right? But like they're a little similar. I just thought about pirates. Here's another one maybe you're exposed to if you have kids or grandkids. Disney characters. They just tend to, whatever they're doing, they just start singing, whether it's work or they're out in a field or a bird lands on a finger or something. I don't know. They just sing. And perhaps something that we've all experienced, and perhaps maybe the one that you're like, David, this is the obvious one, birthdays. Right? We all we get together in a room and we sing for birthdays. But, and quite obviously what we're talking about, church people sing. Church people sing. It's what we do. Right? Well, why do we do that? And I don't really like that. Or maybe it's hard, or you're forcing me to be musical, or I'm not artsy, or I lift weights. I don't lift my voice, right? So like that's how that works. Like, I don't know where you're at with all of that, okay? So just to be clear, I'm not aiming this at you. As a church, I'm not a pastor getting up and being like, okay, guys, this is why we have to do this. I just want to talk about it for a little while because I think it's interesting and it actually may have an effect on how we live, okay? So we're going to take a look at a passage of Scripture where a guy named Paul, who was the first missionary of the early church, is writing to a church in Colossae. That's the name of the town. And the letter that we have is known as Colossians, because that's what they were. They were Colossians. And so he's writing to them, and he wants to tell them how great God is. So he begins to unpack that. Toward the end of this letter, he says, here's how that shows up in your life. And this is one of the verses that he writes on how that shows up. Here's what he says in Colossians 3, chapter 16. This is all we'll be at today. This is what he says. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. That's what he writes. And he's writing to this group of people who was a church, probably no bigger than this church, to be quite honest. And these were Roman and Greek people who had come to know Jesus. These were Jewish people who had converted to Christianity in that time. And they're all gathered together. And he gives some reasons here on why we sing, which is the same for today. Here's the first reason we sing. We sing because there's good news. Look at what he says. He says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. This phrase, the word of Christ, you're like, what word is that? Right? What are we talking about? Well, he means specifically, this is like short code or a hyperlink for the gospel or the good news of Jesus. In other words, Christians believe that there's something wrong with this world, and unfortunately, that's us. That all of us, we all want to be our own boss. We all want to do our own thing. And because of that, the price of living in a world like that is death. Spiritual, physical, emotional, relational, across the board. But God did something about that. He actually came to this earth to reverse that curse, took it upon himself, and now in Jesus, God is undoing all that we have done wrong. He's making all things new. That's the way the Bible would talk about it. And that, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, is what we would call the good news. And it makes a world of difference. In other words, he's saying there's something inside of you that ought to come out, right? So singing is always an overflow of the heart. That's why breakup songs are really good breakup songs when they're really like over the top and emotional, right? That's like why Miley Cyrus comes in like a wrecking ball, right? And Miranda Lambert, she's gonna like, I don't know, like destroy your life and take your dog and like end up in jail or whatever she says. I can't remember how that goes, right? It's just like, it comes out. That's why love songs are great. They're always about mountains and seas and rivers and stars and I will always love you. I'm not going to try to hit that note this morning, right? But that's why we do those things. There are no Grammy award-winning songs, of course, now that I say that, one of you is going to find one, that goes like this. I woke up this morning, it's daylight savings time, I ate some oatmeal and I put on some shoes, now I'm here. That's not a good song. That's horrible. Why? Because it's just describing the day. It's not the overflow of your heart, right? If it's not coming out of you, it's probably not going to win any award, right? Now, here's what he's saying. He's saying the good news for Christians is to live inside you. The word there, dwell, literally means to take up residence. So he's saying the good news for followers of Jesus, it like rents your heart. It buys your heart, renovates it, moves in, and it's there. It's always in there, and you can't get rid of it. It's inside your heart. It's going to come out somewhere if it's in there. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a song or thought of a song that you just can't get out of your head, right? Like this one, maybe. You're welcome. This is Baby Shark. Some of you know this. If you don't, I don't know where you've been for 2020 or 2021. But this song, it just gets lodged in your brain, right? So you've got, like, all across the United States, there are grown men who own large companies in suits and ties driving to work with this stuck in their head. Baby shark, do 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 do. Baby shark, do 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 do. People are constantly sitting in PowerPoint presentations or giving PowerPoint presentations going, baby shark, do 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 do. Baby shark, do 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 do. You're in a Zoom meeting this week in class. It's baby shark, do 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 do. You're standing in line at Kroger and it's just baby shark, do 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 do. Right? Parents are disciplining their children and it's baby shark, do, because it's stuck in your head. Right? You're going to bed at night, you're turning off your light, and you're saying, good night, honey. Baby shark, do, 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 do. Baby shark, it's just in there. Now look, for followers of Jesus, that's the way the gospel works. You get up in the morning, and you're brushing your teeth, and it's God paid the price to love me when no one else would. You're driving to work, and it's like God has brought me into a family that I didn't deserve. You're going to school, you're giving a PowerPoint presentation, and in the back of your mind, it's like God's mercy is so great that I can't stop thinking about it. It's good night, honey, I love you, and you go to bed, and it's like Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's in there. In other words, when we get together to sing, we're not manufacturing something. All we're looking to do is to bring out what God already should have put inside, right? You're bringing it with you. We're not trying to put it in you on a Sunday morning. In a book called, I forget the name of the book, Get Corporate Worship, Matt Merker says this: we don't go to church to worship. We worship because we are the church. In other words, it's part of what we're doing. And so if you're not familiar with church, or if you've gone to church and you're like, the lights are low or they're bright, or there's some guy raising his hands, or what's with that, here's what's happening. It's just a time, singing is a time, when your head, your heart, and your hands can align along the same thing, okay? So if someone puts up their hand, it's just what's coming out of their heart. If someone kneels, it's what's coming out of their heart. If someone stands there like this, it's not any greater or any less. It's just the way they're expressing what's going on inside of them when it comes to the good news of Jesus. There's a pastor in Cleveland. His name's Alistair Begg. I love what he says. He says, I can tell when a man is converted by the way that he sings. Because you'll get some burly lumberjack dude with plaid and flannel who works all day in the sun, whose hand's like a mitt when he shakes your hand, but cries like a baby when he comes to church. Why? Because of the good news of Jesus. All right, that's why. Now, maybe you're sitting here and you're going like, you don't know the week that I've had, and I'm glad that you're saying there might be something going on inside me, but there's a lot of stuff on the outside that's kind of like covering that up. So when we come on Sunday morning, it's like, where is the good news of Jesus? Like, clear it out of the way. I got to find it, right? Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's a second reason here that we sing, and it's not just because of good news, but also we sing because you need it, and by the way, so do I. Look at what Paul says. He says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom. Who is he saying this is being directed at? One another. He's saying there's a one another aspect to singing. In other words, I don't know if you grew up with this idea, or maybe this is just something you've caught or you thought you've picked up on. Singing is not me time with Jesus. That's not how that works. Not alone time with Jesus. Singing is we time with Jesus. There's a corporate aspect to that. So some of you are like, hey, could we turn down the lights a little bit? One of the reasons, just by the way, one of the reasons we keep the lights where we keep them a little bit during worship is so that you can cognitively know there are other people singing with you. We don't want you to think that you're alone. But we also don't want it to be awkward, so we kind of try to split the distance there, right? You're with someone together. There's some scientists in Sweden who did a study. And here's what they found. They found that in everyday choral groups, guys and ladies who sing in the choir, whether that be in a corporate worship setting or whether that be in a performance setting, so think like Handel's Messiah or the opera, here's something that they found. They found that not only do their voices harmonize, but actually what happens is that their heartbeats synchronize. Isn't that crazy? Physically, when you sing with other people, over time in that song or that event, they watched as the heartbeat of one person slowed down and the heartbeat of someone else sped up until they were actually on the same page. It's fascinating. Now, what happens physically to people is what the Bible is saying is actually happening spiritually to you and me when we gather. That we might get our hearts together on the same page. He says teaching. What's teaching? Well, teaching literally means to instruct. It means to tell someone the truth. Here's what I know about me, and I'm just going to guess this might be the same thing for you. In a world that constantly asks me how I feel, here's what I need. I need someone to ask me what I know is true all the time. Right? And so I care about how you feel as a pastor. I do. And we care about how you feel when you walk in here on Sunday. But more than that, man, I want to ask you, what do you know is true? What do you know is rock solid? Because here's the thing. Everybody in this world is looking for a platform. Our culture is filled with platforms for you to stand on. You know what we're short on? Foundations. We lack a foundation. We need it. So some point in time, I need someone else to look at me and go, what's true? Lies take root in loam soil. If you want to start believing something that's not true about yourself, not true about God, not true about this world, cut off everybody else and only start listening to your own thoughts. That's what's going to happen. In his book, Rhythms of Grace, Mike Cosper says this: worship isn't merely a yes to the God who saves, but also a resounding and furious no to the lies that echo in the mountains around us. I think he's right. The word admonish, we don't really say that anymore. No one's like, hey, I want to admonish you. The word there means encourage. So not only are we focused on truth, we are focusing on your endurance and how you can keep going. So when you gather together and sing, here's what's happening. Somebody else is saying perhaps the same thing that you wish you could say, right? So we can't guarantee that you're going to be able to sing when you come in, nor are we going to say, hey, you have to sing when you come in. But here's what we hope is happening, that you would come in, and even if you cannot sing because of the week that you've had or the relationship that you're in or the life in which you're enduring, that there might be someone sitting in your proximity who can carry it with you and say the same thing as you. In the Bible, there's a story that's recorded for us in the book of Acts. Two followers of Jesus start to talk and tell the world about Jesus, and they get in trouble with the Roman government because really there's some anger and stuff overflowing at them. But they get pulled out of this riot, which they did not start, and get thrown in jail. And the jailers told, keep them from getting out. That's what a jailer does. And so they put them in stocks and in chains, and the Bible tells us that they actually began to sing, and when they began to sing, the jail began to shake, and miraculously they were the chains fell off and they were freed, and the jailer was freaking out. And it's a tremendous story. I'd encourage you to go read it. One of the most interesting things I've ever heard about that story is I was listening to a pastor preach one time, and he said this: you know what the mistake was? You know what mistake they made with those two guys when they put them in jail? They put them in the same cell, right? Look, you and I, you know what we're doing? We're all in the same cell. It's called life, right? And we come in with all of that stuff into this room together. And the reason we come in together and sit together is not to be alone. It's to be together. And one of the ways that we be together is actually sing. When your health has a problem, you go see medical people. You seek their knowledge, their understanding, their wisdom, their expertise, their support. When your house has a problem, you get online for DIY stuff, you watch some YouTube, you go to Home Depot, you go see the renovation people, right? You seek their help, their time, their expertise. You want to be with them. When their car has an issue, you go and see the mechanic people. All that. Let me just ask you, where do you go when your faith is falling apart? Where do you go? Man, the singing of the people of God is meant to be a comfort to your soul and a cadence for your walk throughout life. That's what it's meant to do. And you say, well, I don't know. I get it, but look, our world, praise, this idea of worship and singing, I look around, there's not a lot of that going on. And I would say maybe not a lot of religious praise going on toward God, but you know what? You don't have to look far for praise. Our world does not lack it. In fact, we love it. We give it to 100 different things all over the place. We like it. Right? We are all born with a proclivity towards praise. We're just born with a proclivity of praise towards me, us, ourselves. If we're to be honest, man, we like the applause. We like the likes. We live for the likes. We want someone to notice us. We want someone to follow the things that we think are praiseworthy, or we give that stuff to. We're all about it. Look everywhere. We're all religious. And I'm not saying, with a faith. I'm talking about the way that we pursue these things of this world. We're constantly giving praise to someone else. Social media is built to give praise toward things. We have followers. We share stuff. And we get approval and dopamine from it. That's how it works. we've set up these systems of applause and praise. Now look, all we're doing is nothing new. There have always been systems of applause and praise. Here's the thing. The church, what we're doing in here as people, is we are setting up a system aimed not at you and not at me, not at ourselves, but aimed at God. So we sing because there's good news. We sing because you need it and so do I. We sing because God is worthy. That's why. Have you ever thought about why a church is set up the way it is? Like, why aren't there tables where you're sitting? Why are we all sitting like this? It's not because you're watching a show. It's not me. Like, I'm not here in front of you to be the thing. Like, we do this. You know what we do? We aim our chairs. We aim our faces. We aim our voices. We set up around this. It's not the band. It's God. It's His Word. He is the one that we are aiming at. He's why we are here. It's not an accident. The focus is directed 100% towards Him. We see that in this verse when he says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to," some of your versions say, toward God. It's Him. That word, hearts to God. There's a phrase there that we've developed in our English language to represent what it means to give your heart to something. That phrase or that word is worship. Right? It doesn't just mean singing in the Bible, but it can mean singing. Right? In fact, you might hear someone say, "Hey, we have a time of worship." Right? So this idea of worship, hundreds of definitions all over for it. I tried to look and find one that I liked, and to be honest, they're all kind of different. So here's what I thought I'd do. I just present a picture for you this morning rather than a definition, because I think, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Here's the picture that we see. It's actually found in Revelation chapter 7. Just some background, a guy named John who followed Jesus. He was a disciple. He was a fisherman, became a follower of Jesus, wrote a biography of Jesus, which we have in here, called the Gospel of John. As he was later in life, he'd been kicked out of society, exiled to an island. They tried to kill him. He didn't die, so they decided, let's get rid of him. He was actually given a picture of what it looks like in eternity, like when everything's the way it ought to be. You might call that heaven. And so John describes for us this kind of like picture of worship. Here's what he says. He says, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb,'" that would be Jesus. "And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, 'Amen.'" That means let it be so. "Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving, honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen." That's a giant picture of God at the center and the universe aiming at Him. You know what's not here? I find it fascinating. You know what's not listed here? The style of music, right? He wasn't like, "Hey, I saw a picture of heaven and it was country music," or "I saw a picture and it was rap R&B," or "I saw a picture and it was like West Coast punk." It's not what he says. Right? There's no style. You know what else is in here? The types of instruments and things like that. Hey, there were drums, there was an organ, there wasn't an organ, there was a harmonica, some guy had a banjo. I don't know. Like, there's none of that. Why? Why? Because it's not about preference. It's about posture. He describes the posture of these people more than he does any type of preference. It's not about you and me. It's about our posture. Here's how I know worship is happening in my life. When I get smaller and God gets bigger. That's it. So our hope would be that when we sing together on Sundays, we get smaller. God gets bigger. That's how we define it. Bob Kauflin, in his book, Worship Matters, puts it this way. God isn't a genie we summon by rubbing the bottle called worship. He doesn't exist to help us get where we really something else. Holy, holy. There is no one and nothing like the Lord. Man, just kind of lays it out there. Now maybe you're here and you're thinking this and you're like, okay, that's great. What does that mean practically? I actually want to give you a couple practical things maybe to consider. If you're like, okay, I'm a little bit moved. I got it. All right. What would you say? Practically, here's, I think, some things we could consider together. The first is this. Prepare. Like, prepare during the week for the gathering on Sunday. You say, well, what does that look like? Well, maybe it means you learn one of the songs that we've sung here, or you sing it during the week and come along, or you come prepared to sing. Maybe you ask Michael what we're singing the coming next week, and you put it on a playlist on Spotify, and you listen so you're ready. Maybe it just means you go to bed at a reasonable hour on Saturdays so that you're actually able to be here, because we need to. Right? That'd be the second part. Prioritize. Right? Prioritize. Like, singing is not something we do until we get to the real part of the service, which is the message. Right? So maybe we're here earlier in our seat, ready to go to participate, that's the last one, in what's happening. Right? Just 100 different ways. Look, here's what's happening. There is no way, right, worship is going to happen if it hasn't happened during the week with you. And you're just bringing it with you. Getting ready and putting it in its place in your life. You say, well, how does this work? Well, I think when we see Revelation chapter 7, and as we begin to put these things in place, we get like this picture of like this majestic God over all things, who we can actually go and be with and be a part of what all creation is already doing. Right? So, if you think about this, if you look in the Bible, creation sings, angels sing, kings sing, shepherds sing, prophets sing. Here's what we find out. Even, we're told, God sings. So here's the question, right? Why not me? Why not me? If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you would know that it is phenomenal to look at. It's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of miles of just rugged, majestic, vast grandeur. Literally, they named it the Grand Canyon, right? I don't know. They're like, this is, which, it's grand. How big is it? It's grand, right? I've heard that there's nothing like seeing it and standing there, because when you stand there, you realize how big it is and how small you are. You get a little bit of that, right? Here's how we are as people. We always want to share stuff, even before Instagram, even before Facebook, even before, whatever your latest platform is that you're using to share what you got going on. We want to share things, because there's nothing worse than experiencing the best food you've ever had and have no one to tell about it. There's nothing worse than having like the best experience you've ever experienced and not being able to like share it with someone, right? So back before all this stuff, we had postcards, right? Which means someone would see the Grand Canyon and go, oh my gosh, I got to tell somebody. And they would go to a store, and they would use probably real cash money, I know, and they would pay someone, and they'd get a real physical card, and they'd flip it over, and they'd go, maybe it's family or friends, and they go, they're having a great time at the Grand Canyon, seafront, wish you were here. And they put a stamp on it, and it goes to your house, because they want to share it. And you, on a Monday, have just spent all day at the office, and you get home, You're like, oh, the mail came. I'm going to check the mail. So you go to the mailbox and you open it up and you bill, junk mail, right? Maybe there's some, I don't know, election stuff in there. And you're like, oh, okay. What's this? Oh, a postcard. How quaint. Wish you were here. Yeah, it looks nice, right? And we take all that grandeur and all that 1,000 miles of wonder, we take it inside and we go, and we put it on the fridge. We go about our life. I think sometimes we look at the picture in Revelation as a postcard from some prophet out there going, wish you were here. But do you realize that because of Jesus, because what God did in Jesus, you don't have to wait? You could be there right now. The Bible would tell you, you are there right now. The Apostle Peter puts it this way. He says, as you come to Jesus, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, a chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. That's what the church is. That's what we're doing together. Now notice, he doesn't say as you come to a building. He doesn't say as you come to music that you like. He doesn't say as you come to a geographic location. He says as you come to Jesus. That's how it works. That for each one of us, as God shows himself to us and we respond to him, something amazing happens. We find that we're not alone. And we also find that we're at home, standing in front of a God who is over everything. That's the invitation. To gather week in and week out, not as a ritual, but because of one reason: Jesus Christ. The why matters. Two stonecutters were cutting exactly the same stone. They were both asked the same question. What are you doing? The first one, chiseling away, intently stopped, put his hammer down, looked up and said, I am carving a perfect cube. Second one, chiseling, also stopped, put his hammer down, said, this, I'm building a temple. Right? Makes a difference. We're not just opening our mouths and letting phonetic sounds with sound waves come out. We're building a building. We're building a temple towards God. So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to invite you into that. We got plenty of time to practice doing that between now and Easter. Okay. Would you join me? Let's pray. Father, thank you so much that we are not alone. Thank you that the gospel, the good news, is something that you put in us to change us. Thank you for putting it there in the first place, for being the author, really, of all of our singing. God, would you remind us of the goodness of that again? Would you use this time this morning just to put it in our memory so that as we go through our week, it's there? God, I pray for the person who's here today and it's just really rough and they can't sing. They can't even know where to start. God, I just thank you that they're here. Thank you that you put us in proximity. Would the singing and the voices of the people around them carry them today? Carry them right to you. God, for the person who's here and for those of us who maybe we can't sing because we've never come to you. It's not that we can't carry a tune. We've just never actually met the God of the universe. Even now, would you meet them here today? That bring their life and their junk and their mess to you because you want it. Lord, as we lift up our voices this morning, would you remind us that it's not about the building or our preference, but that we might be a people just in awe of you. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen.